Alright, so this is my review of Fantastic Four: The First Steps. I'm gonna try my best to keep the first section spoiler free, but I'm gonna alert people when I do have to talk about spoilers way later in the video. Anyway, I just got fresh out of the theater for this, and I guess my expectations weren't really like super high, but I remember seeing like some of the trailers and going, oh, this looks kind of dope. Fantastic Four itself as a film franchise. As a film franchise itself, everyone knows the history of these characters, where some of these movies were very lackluster. Everyone remembers the infamous Fant 4 stick done by Josh Trank, who did Chronicle, and Chronicle was like really good, but a lot of studio interference came in with the Fox Fantastic Four and it was just a mess. There was also Fantastic Four from 2005, which is honestly, it is a fun movie. It is a guilty pleasure, but they don't tap into the full potential of characters like comic accurate Doom. Julian McMahon, RIP, he definitely did a great job for what they gave to the character, but still they could have tapped in a little bit more into it. It was the origin story, of course, and then you had the sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, that turned Galactus into a fart cloud. A lot of people look back negatively on the sequel, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Again, a lot of elements they dropped the ball on, and of course Fan 4 stick, and there was the Roger Corman Fantastic Four, which I heard was also not really the best. They were striking out a lot with these previously established movies, whether it's a pin that falls somewhere. Therefore, the main thing that's going to be on people's minds is this finally the Fantastic Four adaptation you've been looking forward to for years? Is this finally the one that will sing all the high praises? And for the most part, for me, I thought this movie was relatively good. I did. First and foremost, you got to go into the visual style of the film itself, and it's kind of reminiscent of this 1960s Jetson look to the entire thematic of the film. I said it before, I made a little allusion to this in a previously established video after watching Superman. They really cooked with the visual flair of this movie, and of course there were people roasting it during the trailers, saying it didn't really look that great, or the Silver Surfer really wasn't cleaned up to my benefit. They cleaned all that up and then some. There is one chase sequence in this film that I think kind of caught me off guard with how it looked visually striking, and when they have this certain little sequence in there, I'm trying not to give it away too much, where the Fantastic Four has to go and do an objective. It's just really stunning with the way that it looks, with the way that planets will tear apart in this film, with the way that effects are made, with how lava looks in the film. I think you're going to love it in IMAX. It's definitely a visual treat. And the whole retro futuristic town that the Fantastic Four is in, because they are not in 616 in the main universe, they are in the universe 828. And there's a cutesy reference to that a little bit later in the film that you're gonna kind of understand when they tell you. But for the most part, Matt Shockman's visual prowess remains unprecedented in my personal opinion. He really bought the thunder of making this classic vibe, this classic retrofuturism stand out in terms of the tonality, in terms of the atmosphere, which once again brings that ever-present dread in the story once we get to the point where Galactus, the king himself, coming down to destroy worlds and conquer everything. That just looks stunning with how they introduce him and the entire aspects from there. Of course, the team, storyline wise, basic story is the team has to go out and stop him. You get the short introduction of the Fantastic Four, where they've been doing this for 4 years with crime fighting. They show a little sizzle reel at the beginning. It's not too much of a big deal, but they show a little sizzle reel at the beginning that puts you up to speed with their personalities. And once again, if you know the origins of Fantastic Four, they get affected with cosmic rays that affect their DNA. You have the core four, which is Reed Richards, who is portrayed by Pedro Pascal in this movie. And for what I thought of his performance, I thought it was fine for Reed Richards. You go through this multitude of emotions between Reed Richards, you know, being very, very smart. He's the smartest man in the world, obviously. And he goes through a multitude of emotions with becoming someone that is a new father in this film. Once again, and you know, they have the whole thing with Franklin Richards, and he is dealing with the weight of, oh, I'm going to be a dad now. How do I be pragmatic in the situation, or how do I use my wits in the situation, or how do I think? And maybe he overthinks or overachieves, and there's certain characters that will call out those perks and traits, and they will say certain things in the film where it's like, maybe that's not the most ideal way, or maybe you overthought this or overthought that. And you see some of the depression that comes out of the character when, you know, certain situations come into play, and then you think to yourself, okay, I don't think that he thinks he's going to get out of a jam in this situation. And you see some of the depression seep out on Reed, and I thought that was played pretty well by Pedro Pascal. I thought that it gives us a nice mix of, you see Reed being hopeful, optimistic, happy, and then downtrodden, sad, overthinking, just spending all of his life in the office, which other characters start to call him out on, spending less time with the family because he overachieves, and you really get that call to the character with his comic accuracy. And I like that eventually you start to see the whites in his hair from being overworried, working too much, and that sort of comes naturally, organically into the film, once again embodying that character. The Thing, portrayed by Ben Grimm. I mean, not Ben Grimm. You know, Ben Grimm's the character, so my bad. But he is portrayed by Evan Moss Bachrach, who played Micro in the Punisher Netflix series. The Thing is rarely in the film compared to the other core three, and I thought that was a little bit jarring. I thought that was a little bit weird. I think I can guesstimate from the research that I've done in this film, and of course Matt Shockman talked about a director's cut that's not happening due to the visual effects that needed to be worked on, but it feels like the Thing, he comes in at certain particular moments within the movie, and he serves as a reassuring guide, whether there's turmoil between Sue Storm, whether there's banter or jokes that is told with Johnny, and they're going back and forth, and it's funny, don't get me wrong, it's really humorous. I think the stuff with Johnny and Ben Grimm is going to be some of the highlights between those two characters, and then you see him come in to help a downtrodden Reed and be like, you know, don't really worry about it, or we'll think of something later. And he's sort of like, he's kind of a part of the heart and charm of the film that's not utilized way too much. Usually back then, when we think of the Thing in the 2005 movie with Michael Chiklis, he had an origin story where the Thing looks at himself and he says, you know, I'm ugly, who wants to be me? My girlfriend's literally thinking I don't exist due to the way that I look. And it was a sad throughput of a story that they implemented, and you kind of see just a portion of it here. It's in the trailer, obviously, so it's not too big of a deal to talk about, but there is a point where the Thing looks into a television and it's like, oh, I'm ugly, woe is me, I wish I, you know, was just back to my old self, my old looks for a little bit. But he likes being the Thing, and they don't really focus too much on that downtrodden aspect, because I guess we get a lot of that out of Reed Richards in this one. And for this, the Thing just loves what he does. He loves pulverizing and punching things, and that's the core of his character, and it works for what it is, really. really, with the team synergy involved. So you got a little 2 for 2. I just wish they would have showed a little bit more of him, had more of those integrated aspects. It seems like the main thing the movie tries to go for is when he tries to be a little bit more sociable in the film. You'll get what I'm talking about when you see it, but and they don't ultimately end up going anywhere with the subplot involved with him being super sociable, but for him and his participation with the team, it obviously works really well. Sue Storm, now Sue Storm, as I said, Ben Grimm himself, he's the sort of a loving and caring person that's there for the teammates, and Sue Storm is the bigger heart overall within the overarching story, where she, portrayed by Vanessa Kirby, she is the one who tries to not only uplift the citizens, but also the team itself when they're going through this crisis of trying to save Earth from Galactus. And again, you get the whole thing with her pregnancy in this movie, where she has Franklin Richards, and she wants to do everything in her power to protect her family, and you get that motherly vibe and aspect from the character as you continue watching it. And I thought that was a very sensible route. You might say, oh, this is very basic to get this character this motherly trait, but another reviewer put it really best, and I'm gonna drop his name here. His name is Cody Leach, where he said Sue Storm in the 2005 Fantastic Four, it just felt like she was very, very, very flesh and not flesh, I would say all bones and no substance, actually, because you basically just looked at that version of Sue Storm and it was like, oh, she's hot, she has powers. There's this scene where they strip her down to her knickers, and I swear to God, like, that's mostly the character development of her throughout that version of the film, whereas this one you get the substance and the motherly aspect, and it's not just the super hot Sue Storm stuff going on, but she gets a lot of core moments. I definitely believe that her and Reed, those are the two that get the most chops and centerpiece of what they're doing in the story, where Reed is all over the place, overthinking and putting in analogies and getting accustomed to his life. Sue, on the other hand, is the one that's trying to encourage people to, you know, take on these things. She's like part of a UN Congress thing, where she tries to use and instill hope and courage and break down borders between certain people within the story. And it works for what her character is, and it brings this wholesome vibe to what Sue Storm does throughout the movie, and I really appreciate that. I thought that was done really well. She has like a few little ahead of the curve jokes there that I think worked on point with the other members, and you mostly get the family dynamic that spills in a lot from her as well, mostly with all the people as well. The chemistry is very important for a Fantastic Four film, and so far, for the most part, I like the three that I listed off. Fucking Reed Richards, Sue Storm, and of course Ben Grimm. But then we get to Johnny Storm. Now, Johnny Storm in this film, portrayed by Joseph Quinn. I've seen him before. I heard he was in Stranger Things, and he's a prominent character there, but I also saw him in the Quiet Place prequel, Day One, I think it was, and I do remember his character and the female protagonist in that movie. Really well done stuff in that film, even though people could say, oh, that's another basic movie or whatever, but I did like their characters for the most part, and I remember seeing his face there, and I remember him migrating over. I was like, oh, I don't know, how is he gonna work with Johnny Storm? And there was that controversy with the fact that people thought they were, you know, removing and taking away elements of the womanizer aspect to Johnny Storm's character. And there is some, like, he's not this 100% super playboy like Evans, but what they tried to do with him here, I appreciate it, because once again, there's that family synergy, so that works on all fronts with him wanting to be more included within the plans of what's going on. And I get that sense of what the film tried to say, where they tried to basically put Johnny into a box of saying, oh, I thought he was the dumb one, right? And it's something that you've seen in other Fantastic Four movies, but they do something a little bit interesting with it, where they make Johnny a bit integral in the story, and I think that it was perfect. It was perfect in showing that not only did he have character development with other characters within the film that worked fine, it made Johnny rise above the depths of what his character was usually portrayed as in the 2005 film, which is, you know, the hothead, the pretty boy, the womanizer, the lunkhead. There is womanizing aspects in the film, and I thought they were pretty clever for what they were, but they also tried to show that there were dimensions and layers to Johnny in terms of figuring out his own problems and solutions as to what's going on, and offering up his own ideas, which made him core to the story, and it made that neglect seem something like, okay, we gotta actually start listening to this guy now, because he might have something to say that's readily important to the plot itself, and he might offer us provisions that we might not have even thought of or expected if it wasn't for Johnny Storm, which I like that. It made him feel like he wasn't just a filler character. He had something to do on his own accord. As for the other characters, who am I forgetting? I guess the big bads, you have Galactus and Silver Surfer. So of course, Silver Surfer in this universe is Shala Ball, and she descends from, you know, space, the space and time continuum. She comes down, and you see this in the trailers, where she says, your planet is marked for death. It's over. Galactus wants to come in and eat it, and they have to solve the problem. It's a little bit more to it, but for the female Silver Surfer, how can I dance around this? Because she has some spoiler elements to her. How can we do this dance, partner? They bring in some humanity aspects that I wasn't really expecting from the character. I have to basically leave it there because I can't flat out tell you everything. It's so fucking hard. But they humanize the character in a very interesting way that I think people are gonna kind of say, oh, now I get what's going on. But she's also ruthless and very fierce, and she gives the Fantastic Four a big run for their money. I thought that her role was fine for the most part. I thought it was fitting, and it makes me want to see the other heralds, the other Silver Surfers in the universe from other universes, whether it's 616 or other planetary, you know, beacons that they come in, and what is their interpretation and what is their version of Galactus. I want to sort of see more of that cosmic side, because now in the MCU, they are really leaning in heavy to that notion, and I believe it's going to get more paramount as we go into Secret Wars, Doomsday. We're probably going to see more notions, aspects of that, namely Secret Wars, though. But I liked her. I liked her character. You know, she delivers things in sort of a flat tone, but you know, then you see the human side and the emotions, the humanization, they start to surface in certain scenes, and I thought that was really well done. Galactus himself, this is the Destroyer of Worlds, the Eater of Planets, done by Ralph Ineson, who I think he voiced Sid in Final Fantasy 16. Yeah, he did. And he has this booming presence. I mean, the first time you see him, you're automatically, you see that he is a big, gigantic threat to the Fantastic Four, that this dude will be the end of their existence as well as you know it, and it's very dangerous for him to get out and start getting around and eating worlds, and it starts to accumulate more and more and more, and it shows how dire the situation is as it goes along. Fantastic job all around. I said that word again. Fantastic job all around for all of the characters having their moment and being invested into them in their own way. I do believe though that I wish I could have saw like more of Galactus just going around eating planets, fucking stuff up, but for what they presented in the film of his big booming presence, I think it was a great job overall, all things considered. It brought me into the big interplanetary threat that was going on with this guy. And you, man, when you first see him and there's that big, you just hear that noise, and when he like wakes up, it is absolutely crazy what they did with the sound design, the look. This is probably, I mean, it's not a high bar, but in terms of comic book media with Galactus and, you know, him versus the fart cloud, this was more superior and striking in appearance for sure, and voice and how he sounds, so deep voice and everything. I'm going to get into the things that, so I like the performance, and I like the chemistry, and I felt it was very important to nail that and have that in. And for this reboot, like, people say, oh, this is the best Fantastic Four movie of all time, and it's like, well, I mean, it's better than all the previous ones. It might come to blows a little bit with some of the things that 2005 did, because 2005 I think had some great moments as well, but Doom was, well, Doom kind of sucked in there. But no disrespect, I liked some of the things the actor did, but it wasn't truly comic accurate Doom, whereas I think, well, the one that's coming in Doomsday, Robert Downey Jr., he has an opportunity to bring more substance to the character, which is what I wish they would have did for Julian McMahon. Once again, rest in peace. This movie, there are things I disliked as well. I'm giving a lot of praise. Let's go into some of the weaknesses. I feel as though character, I think is the thing, yeah, I said he was a bit underdeveloped, and I think that goes with some of the things in the production of the movie. Mostly, you know how Marvel likes to go into filming without a script and then they trim some fat from the film. I think we lost a couple of humanizing elements from the thing, which could have been better realized if that was in the film, because if you want wholesome family moments, you gotta embrace the characters getting, you know, equal amounts of screen time, and I felt like he didn't get a whole lot. Another thing is that I do feel like the plot itself, the general plot, the general storyline itself is very, very point A to point B basic, okay? I felt like the first half of the film was so goddamn awesome. It's so fucking awesome. And then in the middle of the film, you get the conflict, the threat that comes in with Galactus, and you start to understand the stakes. This is a very dark movie in tonality, which readily surprised me, because you know how the MCU likes to spice things up with humor, and they input humor to add in levity to scenes, and this is actually regarded to some folks out there who doesn't like MCU humor, that doesn't like Marvel humor, as a criticism, but this movie plays it straight with a serious tone as soon as Galactus is introduced. Like, at that point, when they get the ball rolling and this motherfucker activates, the film is serious throughout, and that was something I was not expecting whatsoever. I thought for a fact there is jokes in the film, of course, and I did think they were funny, and I did think the way they were placed were fine. But there's a weird feeling in the back of my head after leaving the theater, and I went, this feels like a Marvel movie with the least amount of jokes I have ever seen in a long time. Like, I'm used to these movies trying to input the fun factor in there, but I just thought, like, compare this to Thunderbolts. I felt like Thunderbolts had a lot more jokes going on than this one, and that realization hit me that this is a breath of fresh air. Like, I'm glad they went the dark route with Fantastic Four, where it's like all serious, the planet is about to be fucked, people don't know what to do, and there's this big sense of dread the entire time, which just kind of bewildered me in a lot of ways. But yeah, it outside of just that praise alone, it's a very point A to point B story, and what's going to be carrying this, again, the first act dope, second act dope, and then the third one kicks in and you just go, huh, that ended in a way that I saw that was predictable, as the sun itself rising at about 6 a.m. in the morning. like exactly the way you think the movie ends, it ends in that fashion, where I guess you could piece it together, right? I don't want to blurt it out loud, but you can sort of piece together what I'm talking about. Like, big smash up moment with the heroes and the climactic villain, and then, you know, the way the movie ends, I was like, this ended how I expected. And then there was the mid-credit scene where I was like, oh, this is actually really dope, this is cool. And then there's the other post-credit scene where I was just like, wow, this didn't really need to exist. Okay, I was disappointed. I remember one guy in the theater, he saw the second post-credit scene. The first one, I would say, yeah, that got me intrigued by some stuff, but the second one was like, I wasted my time, I should have just left. Like, he's like, this is some bullshit. So that's how I felt about the credits in a non-spoiler way. But yeah, the first act great, second act great, and then the third act is kind of and then, as I said, this movie is a very basic point A to point B experience, but what carries it is the characterization, and everything on that and the comic booky nature of the film is going to hinge on your enjoyment for sure. Because I wouldn't say don't expect any complexity from the characters, because you do get that within certain directions, but the basic plot itself is very, very predictable when it happens, and it just continues out of that second act, and you're going, huh, they should have put maybe a twist in here or something to that magnitude. It felt like the movie just needed a little bit more to spice up that formula at the end, and it would have been a perfect third act. It would have been a perfect ending, as opposed to ending in a climactic superhero way. Overall, though, I enjoyed Fantastic Four: The First Steps. While not a perfect movie, I would definitely give this movie an 8 out of 10. If you like the Fantastic Four, as I drop my flash drive on the floor, okay, but if you like the Fantastic Four, you're going to like this film. Just as a general moviegoer who wants a fresh reset, and you don't want to be bogged down by quote-unquote homework of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then this is a fresh slate as well on top of that, which presents a standalone story that tells its own plot from point A to point B, despite being a bit basic. The characterization is awesome here. I believe the heavy hitters came out and they did what they had to do. The film itself looks very striking. The action, when it does happen, I liked it for the most part. Although I do think there could have been some more action set pieces, but for what the first half and the second half presents, if they would have had just a little bit more of that, that would have been fine. But given, I think, the overall origin, just outpacing the origin and not showing the heroes in action for the allotted amount of time, that is kind of hurting action scenes in some of these movies, because I had the same feeling with the intro Superman, where he's getting his ass kicked and we don't see that fight. They just cut to him being beaten and thrown into the snow, right? So I think that's just a problem with skipping past a lot of stuff all around, but I do understand this is easy to get into, and I think most folks that are going for a good time are going to like the chemistry for sure, or going to like the set pieces that they do present. But it is a film where you do tell yourself it could have been a little bit more fat on the bones and this would have been way perfect. But this is the best Fantastic Four movie that we have gotten in a long time, and I would definitely give this movie like a letter grade of a B. I would give it an 8 and 7.5, sits in that range, definitely good. But I'm sitting more between the 8, so I guess it depends on repeat viewings for me, but we will see for sure. Alright, so that is the end of the non-spoiler section. We're gonna get right into it with Fantastic First Steps spoilers. I'm gonna do a countdown. Here's the countdown to spoilers only. Here we go. If you don't want to be spoiled, turn back now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's spoiler time. The first point that I was alluding to a lot in that first non-spoiler half, and it was one of the criticisms I had about this movie, was that the plot itself is a very, very basic plot. And what I mean by that is, you know, everything you saw in the trailers is most of the plot of the film, where Galactus is coming to destroy their planet, destroy their universe. But the extra step is that they go into space again in the second half of the film, and they broker a deal to Galactus. You know, they want to talk to him, they want to broker this deal, and in the midst of the deal, Galactus basically wants Franklin Richards. He finds him to be the being that will replace him after he has eaten him, and the Fantastic Four, obviously they against that shit. It's like, nah, no way, you're gonna eat our child, no way. Any paternal instinct of being a parent or whatnot, that's going to kick in immediately, and it kicks in for Sue, it kicks in for Reed, it kicks in for everybody. You're not having this baby. The deal is that either Galactus eats the baby and Earth is saved, or he eats Earth and everyone just fucking dies right there. That is the entire plot of the movie. I kid you not, right? That is it. That is the plot from point A to point B to point C. As soon as that happens, that's what the threat is. And is it a threat that is captivating and interesting to what's going on? I would say for the personal character moments, it makes sense, yes. But if you're expecting a little bit more, then I think this movie will probably fundamentally fail for you, because that is literally it. They are trying to protect the baby at all costs, and that is most of the movie. That's why I said a lot of this movie's enjoyment for personal people is going to hinge on the characterization being A1 solid alone, because I think there's not enough twist in the movie to justify a lot of the ends of the means, which is why I feel when we get to that third act, it gets a bit soggy, because as I said before in non-spoilers, but I'm highlighting them now in spoilers, it ended on a note that I expected, which was the climactic superhero showdown between the Fantastic Four and Galactus, and that's about it. You see him stretch out Reed a little bit, seeing, hey, can we stretch? Galactus stretches him in opposite directions. Hey, how far can he go before his guts like tear out all over the place? And you get those dramatic moments. You know, they play it with the fact that, hey, Sue might be dead after using so much of her energy, her invisible energy and force fields, to push Galactus back into the the molecular pit where they'll send him back, and he won't find the planets for like another, I don't know, million years as they calculated it. But it ended in a typical fashion, a typical way. The heroes just defeat the bad guy, and obviously I guess it's due to the setup of these movies that was to be expected. I'm very shocked and surprised that they didn't follow up on how the Fantastic Four got to Universe 616 with the end credits of the Thunderbolts. But I did feel like this post credits was cool because you saw that Doom was just sitting there with Franklin Richards, and I loved the movie. Okay, I will admit this. I actually did like this, by the way. It sounds like I'm critiquing it a lot, but I gave it a B letter grade. That's good. It's an 8, borders on 8, 7.5. That's still good, but I liked that there was this Easter egg. Well, it's not even an Easter egg. It's like blatantly in the fucking movie, so I don't know what I'm saying. I'm drunk. But you see Sue Storm talking to the UN right there, and you see the chairs of the senators of differing nations, and then you see Latveria right there, but the seat is empty. So I told myself in my mind, you know what, this is gonna come back to haunt them eventually, because Doom is not there. And then he shows up 4 years later. Franklin Richards, he's staring right at him. He got the mask off and everything, or the kid's holding it, and I'm like, bro, this is perfect setup for Doomsday. But I still wish we would have, I guess we're gonna find out somewhere in Doomsday how they crash into 616. And I do think that Reed mentioned somewhere in the movie that he knows about sort of pocket dimensions and how to get through them with the ship that they had. That's probably what they're gonna use. They're gonna go on Mayday. Maybe Doom forces them out of that universe, and then he starts to come knocking and starts conquering, and or maybe he gets some power from Franklin, and he goes cosmic, right? Like, there's so many possibilities in my mind that I'm brainstorming, and I'm talking, I'm spitballing, that I cannot wait to see the setup and the payoff for Doomsday, for Secret Wars, everything. I could not wait. The other post credits I didn't give a shit about, because dude, it was, in my opinion, just leave after the mid-credit scene, because you're sitting there and you're watching an advertisement on TV for the Fantastic Four. It's like they're in their old garb. It looks like the old 1960s cartoon, right? And then Herbie cuts the TV off, and that's it. That's literally the credit scene. And it's I guess people could say, hey, it's haha, it's funny, Herbie doesn't like old school Fantastic Four or whatever, but it's just not good. Like I said, I had one guy audibly say, oh, that's it, that's bullshit, in my theater, and he got up and left. And that's kind of the way that I was feeling after I watched it. The only other plot point I think I'm missing, again, I guess I can combo this in 2 and 2 together, really, is I talked about how Johnny had his smart moment in Fantastic Four First Steps, and he did, because he is the one that was deciphering the Herald Silver Surfers, the female Silver Surfer, her language, and he was learning more about her, and then he found out and realized that she was also a mother that I believe, if I remember this correctly, correct me if wrong in the comments, but I think she was a mother that didn't want her planet to be destroyed, so they tried to make some simile between her and Sue Storm, where she was a human woman, And in order to save her Earth or planet or whatever, I know it's a different planet entirely, but in order to save what she had to give up her child to be eaten by Galactus, and she was turned into a herald. And she gets emotional in one scene when she comes to realize that, oh, he's going after Franklin now, because the Silver Surfers, they choose which Earth to get destroyed. And she chose 828 to get destroyed and eaten, right? And then she has a moment of reflection when Galactus wants to eat Franklin, and is like, oh, he's just a baby. And then he tortures her, saying that, you know what, I'm gonna eat this motherfucker anyway. It's time for you to sit back and listen. You're a herald, you need to listen to my orders. And Johnny is the one that tries to facilitate that humanity within her again by reminding her of these messages. You let this happen, and you want the same thing to happen to my world, my home. And I like that scene when he was saying it. It's sort of getting into her head the entire time, and showing that, hey, she could have made a better choice. And she does at the end when she decides, hey, Johnny, you're not gonna sacrifice yourself, I'm going to. But mostly their interaction was he has some sort of chemistry with her, and they treat it off as, oh, Johnny, this is your girlfriend, or she is the naked silver woman, and you want a piece of that. I just thought that was funny, that attributed to his womanizer aspects a little bit, but also it brought some tragic relationship between the two, and it wasn't just something where he looked into the silver eyes and just saw sexual tension only. So that was fine, but I think it could have ended in a better and climactic note, and maybe, I don't know, you know what I would have done is I would have had that Doom scene play out where and I know you could say, oh, they're gonna save that sauce for Doomsday, but I would have loved to see it play out, and the danger it would have presented a lot more, and that would have been so worth it to put them in a climactic situation and be like, oh, this is why they have to get the fuck out of here, because this guy's like so goddamn powerful. It's like, what can we do? We have another threat that's bigger than the last threat that we had, and I just feel like the back of the head, the hood, you don't even see it's Robert Downey Jr., but it is him, was just simply saying, yo, we got you for 2 movies only. We can't have you for a full post-credit scene. Can you just not show your face, and then maybe this will be enough for the audience? And I just felt that was kind of weird. The last thing I want to talk about is the illusion to cuts in this film that people are talking about, and that they want a director's cut. I believe this movie was edited down. I think that is actually confirmed, which is why they asked Shockman about a director's cut. And I did think it was weird, and it attests to the whole, oh, they had extra scenes because they were showing them filmed in the post credits. That scene where Reed has his mouth pulled back on, you see more of his stretchy capabilities facially. That scene is not in the film. The scene where the Thing seems to be having a conversation to a dog, that is not in the film. And I personally believe that those scenes, whether small character moments, should have probably been in, and it would have established a little bit more. I understand you're trying to make this breakneck pacing get to the point. You're trying to, they like I said, they sizzle reel the origin story. You don't even see them get cosmic raid. You just hear screams in the background, and it's still horrifying to really think about it, but they're moving past the origin, and they expect you to as well. At least they actually did make an attempt to say, hey, it's there for the people who might not know. That was cute, that was nice, I guess. But I feel as though some of those cut scenes should have made it, and maybe it would have made the characters a bit more, I'm not gonna say a bit more relatable, because they already are in this film for what they have, but stand out more with small centerpieces of their humanity as well, and what they've been through. And like I said, the chickless thing I know has been done with the thing thinking he's ugly or whatever to people, but if it was in the film, I wouldn't have minded it, because I could completely say, oh, I see why he's going through this turmoil or whatever. And what else could I say about spoilers at this rate? I mean, Mole Man. They got Mole Man in the movie, and he's a little bit funny. Again, this is the character, I don't think I mentioned this, but this is the character that they defeated, that Sue Storm talks to, and then when he comes in, he starts roasting everybody at the end. He's the one that gets the civilians away from Galactus's tyranny, because if the civilians were not evacuated to the underground from the Mole Man, they would have been stomped on, killed, crushed, smashed. So you get that still heroic aspect, and the character's thinking ahead there, which is pretty cool in this movie. It definitely could have used a bit more action, because I believe the big action in the film was just two big moments where it's the middle, where they have the wormhole chase, which is the coolest visually striking point in the film, where you see, you know, the little lava bounce off the reflections of Silver Surfer and her chasing Johnny, and them running away from Galactus's little inside metal spaceship, like deteriorating when the deal goes south, and he wants Franklin. And that just looks visually good. And then the end sequence, but other than that, not a lot of action, more of a character study before this threat actually occurs. And I do remember, like, at one point it gets really dire to the point where you see characters doing things, and it's a bit crazy. Like, Reed straight up tells them that you know, we didn't kill Galactus when we went into space to do the thing that we needed to do, and then he wants Franklin. And then it's a cool bit, a scene where the people are like, they turn on them, they actually turn on the Fantastic Four in the movie. I'm pretty sure you got that, you guesstimated that by now, but they turn on them, and he tells them that, you know, they wanted our kid, but the price was too great. And then the people are like, well, what about us? We don't give a fuck about that child. Like, it shows the dregs of how desperate humanity can get, or how desperate people can get if they know they themselves are going to die. They're like, sacrifice the baby. Why are you not like them having riots in front of the Baxter building? Once again, I these little character moments in the place of like another copious action set piece, I do think that it worked for me a little bit better than others. But others wanting all superhero smash ups, you're probably not gonna like that aspect of the movie. But I did enjoy the plot that they introduced, the character beats and everything. And that's the strongest thing, is the chemistry. That's what they needed to nail the most. It's just like how Superman had to nail the hope and encouragement, this movie needed to nail the family aspect, and both of those movies set out to do their thing and do it well. And it's not just another rock'em sock'em robot superhero punch 'em up, but it could have had a little bit more fat to those areas, and I think they would have sufficed. You could have kept the general plot, but I would like to see a Matt Shakman director's cut of Fantastic Four: The First Steps. I think that would be actually interesting to see. It's a shame it's not gonna happen, but I would like it, and I think that would probably raise my score up just a little bit if they had that, because it does feel like the movie does go through its paces rather quickly after the second act, and the third act just could have been a little bit more better. But I did like this movie for the most part. I did. I had a lot more positives than negatives. Even in the spoiler section, I really did And tell me what you guys thought of Fantastic Four: The First Steps. Did you have a blast with it? Did you think it was, well, not really that great? How would you compare it to Superman? I'm still sitting on it. There are some things in Superman I like better, like definitely some more of the action, but there are some things I like better in Fantastic Four. Like, I think the characters themselves, the characters themselves are better because there's more of them, and more of them get more screen presence and their hero moments, where Superman is like the core three is Superman, Lois, and Lex, and then everyone else is like tomato outside of Mr. Terrific giving his stuff out there and being terrific and having his moments. But everyone else, you could say, yeah, they have a slight moment here that is still a little underdeveloped, but in this one I felt like everyone got a chance to shine, and that's what really mattered. And visually this movie just is better than Superman. There's no contest, but there are things I liked more Superman than this. Like I said, action, just the thematic of Superman standing out a bit more, whereas this one is depressing and downtrodden. But overall though, great comic book cinema from Thunderbolts, from Fantastic Four, and from Superman. I definitely would pay the price of admission for these films again. I definitely would like to go see them again for sure. But tell me what you think in the comment section below. That's my movie review done. Take care of yourselves. I'm Renegade Operative. I'm out of here. See you later. Oh, P.S. one more thing. Fucking music. Okay, the fucking music in this movie is so good. You definitely will hear those Fantastic Four. You're gonna hear those klaxons a lot in this film. You're gonna hear that theme a bit, but I'm telling you, when they fire on all cylinders for that theme done by Michael Glacciano, I don't know how to say Italian. He's the guy that did Glacciano. I don't know. He's the guy that did the themes for the MCU Spider-Man movies, where it goes like the classic "Look out, here comes the Spider-Man." It's the music he does for Fantastic Four is so good. So I just had to bring that up. When they use the music in appropriate sections, it is so awesome, man. It is, the sound design in this movie is good. It's spicy. It's really good. I didn't mention it earlier in my review, but I had to mention it somewhere, and I guess it's gonna be in the last section. But yeah, I'm glad that I got that out of the way. Anyway, you guys take care of yourselves, and we are out for real this time. Later.